Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. This is a second in a series of briefings that the chief is going to be providing over the next weeks and months, because we are very concerned, as others are, of the level of shootings that have happened within our city, and we want to make sure that you and everybody knows exactly what we're doing and the efforts, which are very substantial, that are taking place. One of the things that we talked a bit about before was the level of vacancies that exist within the Newport News Police Department. This is not unusual. Throughout the entire country, all departments, most departments are struggling with level of vacancies for a variety of reasons, and we really we feel there needs to be something. The police chief, in his budget proposal for this next year, proposed a series of incentives to recruit and retain officers. And I've looked at that, and I feel like we can't wait for the budget year, that we need to go forward with this now. So this morning, I'm announcing that we will be providing a $2,000 bonus, signing bonus, to any officers that join the police force, go through the academy. And we'll want them to stay for 2 years, but we think this is very, very important. Beyond that, we're going to be working with all our employees, our police officers, and we will be giving them an incentive to recruit others. So police officers, which successfully recruit others to come into the department, will also be getting a bonus, and we're working out details of that. We think that's really important. We think that police officers can be our best recruiters, and so we're going to put everybody to work in this process of recruiting and getting people. In addition to that, every year we look at salaries within the departments and police officers. We've done a number of salary increases over the last 2 or 3 years, and we'll continue to look at that. We'll continue to look at the starting pay. But when we look at starting pay, it also affects everybody up the line, and so we want to make sure we do this in a way to respect all the officers that are working today and be as effective as we can to recruit others. So we will be looking at starting pay as well. So those are important pieces. They're not all of it. We'll be working on other ways of recruiting, retaining people and the officers as well, but very important. So I wanted to provide that message prior to the chief giving his briefing. So, Chief Myers?
Good morning. Certainly want to thank City Manager Borey for that announcement. It's one more tool that we'll have available to us. Before we get into the briefing, we do want to announce with profound sadness that our K-9 Officer Duke passed away last night after a sudden medical emergency. K-9 Duke was one of our bloodhounds and specialized in tracking missing people. He was adopted from the Animal Aid Society in Grafton on October 1st, 2013, and as a result, we don't know how old Duke actually was. We don't have his birth records, but most likely he was 8 to 9 years old. Duke loved to work and helping us find missing folks, but his greatest joy was public demonstrations. He loved meeting people, especially children during school visits, and we would ask our community to join the members of our department in surrounding his partner, Master Police Officer Stewart, his trainer and handler, the Stewart family, and all the K-9 officers. It's a very tight-knit group. They're close with their dogs and they're close with each other. And they're all struggling today for this unexpected loss. People who have never had the joy of pet ownership or having a dog in the family may not understand the sadness that this type of event brings, but I am a dog owner, I get it, and I join in the mourning of Officer Stewart and the entire K-9 family. As we discussed last time, our community is tired of being portrayed as a dangerous place. We know it to be a fine community where great things are happening and the overall quality of life is good. However, we also recognize that Residents in Newport News are increasingly dismayed at the actions of some very dangerous and reckless people who are wreaking havoc in some of our neighborhoods with their acts of violence. This is why the Newport News Police are intensely focused on identifying such violent individuals and removing them and their weapons off our streets. I also want to open, before getting into the cases, by expressing my strong appreciation for the ongoing outstanding work of all of our personnel. From the extraordinarily busy telecommunicators down in dispatch who take your calls and get help on the way quickly, to the first responder officers, to the investigators who carry very heavy caseloads, to the forensic techs who respond out and process crime scenes. Everyone is working at a very high level, showing great devotion to their jobs and the community, and the results show it. So with that, let's demonstrate that with a quick review of some cases. The first slide here is an update on a case we briefed you on last time, where 2 juveniles were under investigation for property crimes at Warwick High School. At the time of the last briefing, both juveniles were charged with 1 count of burglary, and since neither of them had any prior criminal history and would not score high enough on the detention assessment instrument, they were released to their parents until the investigation was completed. Now, the Detention Assessment Instrument, DAI, assesses risk, promotes safety, and guides crucial decisions in the juvenile justice system. It's an instrument that the juvenile detention units throughout Virginia comply with, and police can only report on what crimes the juveniles are charged with at the time of arrest. Since our last briefing, the investigation has concluded, and on January 19th, we obtained petitions for both juveniles on burglary, larceny, possession of burglary tools, possession of tobacco, curfew violation, destroying a vehicle, and identity theft. Additionally, the fire department fire marshals obtained petitions for burning or destroying personal property, burning or destroying any other building or structure, conspiracy to commit a felony, entering a dwelling house with intent to commit arson, and grand larceny. The next day, both juveniles were taken into custody on these petitions and are currently held in secure detention with the Department of Juvenile Services. Now, unfortunately, at our last briefing, when we updated you about this case, there were some who interpreted the phrase released to parents as meaning they got off scot-free. That assumption was incorrect. Our investigators and the fire marshals worked relentlessly to keep building the case to hold these juveniles accountable for their actions. We encourage folks in the community, if we don't do a good enough job explaining how these processes work, please contact us if you have questions or concerns about post-arrest. We would rather get the facts out there than have misinformation grow and build about whether kids are getting off and whatnot. Next slide. Up until a day or two ago, we were going to ask for the public's help in apprehending this dangerous person, but thankfully we're able to tell you that he is in custody. On January 22nd at about 11:40 a.m., officers in the area of Sharon Drive and Warwick recognized this individual, knowing that he had outstanding warrants out of James City County. The officers stopped the vehicle that he was in, and while attempting to detain him, he fled on foot. The officers observed a handgun stuck into his waistband, and at some point as he was fleeing, the gun went off, posing a significant threat to the officers, the public, and even himself. Following this incident, he was wanted not only on the James City County charges, but on additional charges here in Newport News for obstruction, resisting arrest, concealed carry, reckless handling of a firearm, discharging a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school, and possession of a firearm by a felon. On January 25th at 1:29 a.m., officers and detectives took this suspect into custody without incident in the 400 block of Savage Drive. Now, this case is a great example of our officers working to find dangerous people and remove them from the streets of our city. As I said, we were originally going to use this to ask for your help in finding him, and instead we're proud to announce that another dangerous felon is off the streets, and the officers involved showed great restraint in apprehending him without further violence. On January 16th at 1:57 in the afternoon, officers responded to a shooting in the 900 block of Garden Drive. The responding officers found the victim lying in the street. Medics transported him, a 20-year-old Hampton man, to a local hospital with life-threatening injuries. The victim has survived but remains in the hospital and is still dealing with significant injuries. The victim in this case is a documented gang member and has a violent criminal history. Due to the criminal history, we have a strong belief that this was not a random incident. On January 24th at 9:57 in the evening, officers were dispatched to a residence in the 800 block of Sundown Lane in reference to a robbery and home invasion, and on scene police found two men restraining a male. The investigation revealed that this restrained male, 20-year-old Aaron Leon Martin of the 200 block of Dare Road in Yorktown, and two other suspects, a unknown female white and unknown male white, forced their way into the victim's apartment. After breaking into the apartment, the unknown male grabbed a knife and took the wallet and cash of one of the victims. As the three offenders fled, the victims were able to hold Mr. Martin until police arrived. One of the two escaping suspects has been identified, but warrants have not yet been secured. The identity of the second suspect remains unknown, and Mr. Martin has been arrested and charged with robbery, conspiracy to commit felony, and burglary at night to commit a felony. Now, we want to thank the community. We continue to receive very helpful tips from the community that is going to help us apprehend the additional two suspects. On January 21st at 2:26 in the afternoon, officers responded to a shooting in the 700 block of Nanceman Drive. The victim told officers he was outside when he was approached by a black male wearing a camouflage jacket who robbed him and shot him in the face. With the help of a tip and a thorough investigation, detectives identified 24-year-old Xavier Darian Thomas as the suspect in this case. Xavier Thomas was taken into custody by our fugitive apprehension unit without incident on January 24th. He's charged with robbery, malicious assault, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. I'm starting to see a trend where so many of these folks we arrest for violent crimes are prior felons illegally in possession of a firearm. January 17th at 10:49 in the evening, officers responded to the 2300 block of Jefferson Avenue for a report of a shooting. The victim, a 29-year-old Newport News man, was shot in the back. Witnesses at the scene have given conflicting reports, but physical evidence in the scene included over 40, let me repeat that, over 40 rounds of ammunition was fired, and evidence of different calibers and different guns used in this shootout. Now, this case is an example of the unhealthy culture of guns that persists in many of our neighborhoods. Instead of dispute resolution and de-escalation, we see everyone involved pulling out their guns and exchanging in a dangerous exchange of gunfire. And this isn't just during crimes. We regularly get reports of people who step out of their home and shoot guns up in the air, which is a foolish and reckless practice that puts many people's lives at risk. I will tell you, on New Year's Eve, I spent 11 hours riding with officers on the overnight shift, and as early as 7 o'clock that night, we started hearing gunshots going off, and of course, at the midnight hour, it was a cacophony of gunfire. And what people fail to consider is that which goes up eventually comes down. And that's when innocent people and property are at great risk of injury or death. At some point, neighborhoods are going to have to come together and say enough to the gunfire and help us get these guns off the street. We are asking for the public's assistance in identifying the suspects in the case of the 2300 Jefferson shooting, and anyone with information is asked to call the crime line, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, at 1-888-LOCK-YOU-UP. On January 15th at 3:21 in the afternoon, Newport News Dispatch received a call of a past burglary in the 3000 block of Madison Avenue. A tenant of the rooming house observed the front door kicked in and called police. Upon our arrival, officers checked the residence and located a male suffering from several gunshot wounds who was pronounced deceased at the scene. The victim was identified as 21-year-old Luke Patterson Dudley, who was a resident of the house where the incident occurred. The Hampton Police Division has provided us with this picture of the victim, which we are showing today in hopes that someone will recognize him and call in tips to help solve this crime. Anyone with information on this case is asked to call the crime line, again, 1-888-LOCK-YOU-UP. About 5:14 p.m. on January 5th, police responded to the 900 block of Marcus Drive for a deceased person. Upon arriving, officers found the front door of the residence open, and while checking the residence, located a female suffering from a gunshot wound. She was subsequently pronounced deceased by the medics and identified as 30-year-old Manita Poindexter. Detectives continue to investigate this case, and we have received some excellent crime line tips, leading us to believe this was not a random act. We continue to ask anyone with information to call the crime line, 1-888-LOCK-YOU-UP. About 6:30 in the morning on January 19th, police and medics responded to the 500 block of 14th Street to a report of a shooting. According to a witness, There was a loud knock at the door, and when the victim's roommate opened the door, a female fired a handgun into the residence. The male victim, who had been asleep on a couch, was struck by the gunfire. The victim, a 37-year-old Newport News man, was transported by medics to a local hospital where he remains. We have received some tips in this case and continue to actively investigate it. We ask if anyone has information, please contact the crime line. Now let's talk about the crime line a little bit. It's a wonderful tool that we think could be better used to help us reduce violence in our community. If you look at these numbers, you will note the very first line, there was an almost 25% increase in tips in 2016 over the prior year. I like the trend line. I think it may well represent that folks in our community are stepping up and assisting us, and it may, we hope, reflect the strong efforts we're making at increasing the level of trust among residents to work with, as a partner with their local police. The one area, though, that you'll see a significant drop is the recovery of weapons because of tips. So please, if you know someone dangerously carrying a weapon with a likely criminal intent, please call the crime line. You can always remain anonymous. Now, there are some provisions in the Virginia State Code that ensure that your information and anonymity will stay that way, that we cannot use who you are even if we know, and in fact, we don't know who you are when you call the crime line. The first statute cited prohibits police departments from including information about a reporting party to a crime when we release data to, for example, to public records requests. And the second bill defines locally based Crime Stoppers, Crime Line tip programs, such as our Crime Line, and specifically indicates that evidence of a communication or any information contained therein is not admissible in a court proceeding, and that law enforcement agencies receiving information concerning alleged criminal activity shall maintain confidentiality. So we just want to stress, if you're afraid of retaliation or retribution, if you just don't trust the police and don't want us to know who you are, or for whatever personal reasons you choose, we have a powerful tool that will allow you to take ownership in your community, to be a stakeholder and help us identify dangerous people. It's completely anonymous. There is no caller ID affiliated that can read your phone number. The number is answered 24/7. The call taker does not ask for your name or any identifying information. The call takers give the caller a unique number which they later use to identify the case they're calling about. Just the other day when we were preparing for this, Officer Maynard was talking about a call that he received, a woman who was simply making inquiries about how Crime Line worked. And when he got done explaining to her and assuring her of the anonymity, all of a sudden she had a tip to share. So I think it's a very good indication that the more we can get the word out in the community that your identity is protected, perhaps the more willing people will be to share information. If the Crime Line callers can call repeatedly and often are asked to call back if they receive more information. They can simply use that unique number. If the caller's tip leads to an arrest, the caller could be eligible for a cash reward up to $1,000. Now, we think it's important to point out that these rewards are totally funded by fundraising by the Crime Line program, not by taxpayer dollars. Crime Line is not a police department program. It is a community-based program. Again, the number 1-888-LOCK-YOU-UP. Now, in the past couple of years, the Crime Line group has purchased a service called TipSoft, and it's a way to offer users other means to submit tips. TipSoft offers the following options for submitting tips, and it forwards the tips to the appropriate Crime Line program. So the Text a Tip program, for those who like using their phone this way rather than making a call, you can text tip 100 plus your message to, and the code is CRIMES, which in numericals is 274631. So if you use your text on your phone, enter the message to go to 274631 or CRIMES, then in the body of your text, type tip 100 and your message. That tip will get forwarded on to the appropriate agency. And we have, although it's not very legible due to the color, we have a web form also that people can, using their browser, send a tip via the web. And again, it's not traceable to the computer or the user who sends the tip. So we'll certainly encourage our friends in the media to get a more legible copy of the URL, and you can get that out on your various media outlets. That concludes our case review for this morning. With that, we, I think, already have a schedule for the next couple of briefings. We'll continue to do this. Already this morning, we've begun talking about future cases to review at briefings and more information to provide. So we sincerely thank all of you for coming this morning. We're going to continue to try and make sure we give you relevant and timely information. And we would also encourage everyone to regularly visit our Facebook page. We're making a great effort to post at least daily, and quite often more frequently than daily, articles of interest and information about crimes and activities of the department. We're streaming using Facebook Live now to get information out more timely. Similarly, if you don't already subscribe to it, the city has Newport News Now, a daily email blog that goes out to well over 70,000 people daily. And I have started a weekly blog also to try and share information items that may be of interest to our residents. So we welcome additional ideas for more ways that we can push information out to the community, and thanks to our media friends for assisting us in that. We'll see you the next time.